What's going on, peeps? It's Wrath here, hanging out today, playing some Idle Heroes. I want to thank you guys so much for coming out with me today. If you liked the video, don't forget, smash that thumbs up button to show your support, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright guys, we're here today on the private server, because since the events are different, I feel like I should do a video for the official server's events, and then one for the private server events, instead of putting them together into one video, because it seems like it'd be a little bit weird. We're going to run them separate, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the new private server events, but also some changes that happened to the private server, I think, yesterday? I don't know, time is weird. But anyways, for nowsies, we'll take a quick look at the limited events, and then we'll talk about the monsters, because those have been changed up, and that's the game plan for the day. So, let's jump in. First thing you're going to notice, Tavern Quest event. Really easy to do on the private server. Actually, like, it's stupid easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. And you got Heroic Miracle on top of this. The reward here is going to be a Valkyrie, which is actually really cool if you guys don't know much about Valkyrie. I've got an E3 analysis on her. Really solid unit, definitely worth a build in my opinion because she works so well in both PvP and PvE. Nice dual purpose unit, very worth a build. I definitely like her. But as always in the Heroic Miracles, the requirements haven't changed anything. 2 light heroes, 2 dark, and then 3 of the regular factions, with the normal rewards following those. So 24 total heroic scrolls and 10 profit orbs, plus the gear. Not bad. One thing that did not make it over to the private server, which did over the official, is going to be the new gear sets. As you can see, Mage is now in the shop, as well as Assassin. But the Ranger, Warrior, Priest, those 6-star sets haven't made it to the shop over here yet. I'm assuming they will. I doubt they'll just let that go. It'll be a thing. But Tavern Quest, I guess we can just jump in and knock it out. There's not much to talk about in the events. They're pretty simple stuff. But I've got a couple of these, I guess. We can go ahead and knock some of this out, I guess. Just a little bit of it. No, we're not going to. We're going to scroll. And as you see, I have 74 quests out of 15. Simply what that means is I have backlogged that many completed quests. So that's why the number is so huge. So if you scroll down here through all my stuff I need to refresh, you'll hit my 6- and 7-star mission pockets. As you can see, I've got buttloads of 6-star missions. Just stupid amounts of them. It's just retarded. There's just tons. Absolutely tons. We're scrolling here because I got to find my 7-star stash, which is down here. Like I said, on the private server, the Tavern event is the easiest event in the game to complete. It's just stupid easy. We're going to snag out, I guess. This doesn't really matter. We'll grab some gems, because why not? Or gems, as the Queen's English would say it. I don't say it that way. It's gems to me, and always will be. We'll grab that profit orb, because why not? We'll grab, do I have another profit orb laid in here? I got some branches. We'll snag some branches. I don't really need the branches, but I'll take the branches. You know what I'm saying? And I guess we'll snag another branches. You know what? We'll take this branches. More branches there. Give them to me. And that's going to knock out these 6- and 7-star parts of the quest, like boop and like boop. There we go. Pretty simple stuff. Getting my profit orbs built back up. But yeah, the event's really easy this time around. We can talk a little short bit about Valkyrie. Like I said, I've built her before. I've got an analysis on her. But a really solid unit, especially at E3. High health, and her damage scales with her health, which is fantastic. It means she does a lot of damage if she's very tanky. If she's very tanky, she lives for longer. Obviously, those things go very well together, but a lot of the reason people like Valkyrie, especially for PvP, is going to be her last passive. When she gets crowd controlled, she actually is going to heal herself when crowd controlled, but also damage random enemies. So that's not bad. It's a nice little bit of a buff. Even though she is crowd controlled and can't actually attack, she's not like doing nothing and just sitting there frozen or stunned. She's still doing something. She's healing, doing a little bit of damage, and that's why people like her in PvP. I think she's amazing. Basic attack does a dot on the random people, but it's also going to decrease their attack, which is great. And also, it does a burning damage based on her total health. Again, that's why you pump a lot of health on Valkyrie and not so much attack, because all of her real damage scales with her health. So definitely worth pumping that health high. And then this is just her normal passives. High crit chance, which is great though. Not a bad deal. But I would still build her HP instead of building crit, personally. Like I said, very solid unit, works very well in PvP and PvE. It's a unit I would recommend you build no matter what server you play on, official, private, or seasonal. Valkyrie's a great unit and definitely worth the E3 in my opinion. But like I said, everybody's different. You may hate her. If you hate her, well, then don't build her. But like I said, solid unit. Very good. But with that out of the way, the big thing people have been asking me a lot in the comments is, Wrath, check out the new monsters. What do I do with the new monsters? I haven't had time to test all of them. That would be ridiculous. But what we can do is we can run through and kind of get a quick look at the monsters. and what I would say their best use would be at this point. And then you can look at that and say, well, I would rather build this one than this one right now for these reasons, whatever. So first up, the Wolf. The Wolf is actually largely unchanged. It's very similar to what it was before. The heavy damage on the drop, the dot did get nerfed really heavily, down to a 50,000 damage bleed dot, which isn't a big deal. The big reason you run these monsters anyway wasn't so much for the damage over time, it was for the buff that you get when people are bleeding. So your 4 random allies are going to gain increased damage to bleeding targets. Well, since the monster itself is going to drop a bleed for 5 rounds, you're always going to have that bleed damage going. So you're always going to be having that extra damage, and it does boost your damage in boss fights, especially weaker boss fights like Marauders or early guild bosses, even your early broken spaces. This is going to help up your damage because the enemy you're fighting is always bleeding, you're always doing extra damage to them, and the passives aren't terrible. Armor break and block kind of sucks. But one thing to notice about the Wolf is it's very evenly balanced because they did change the HP and attack to, instead of static numbers, they're now a percentage base. So your health and attack is going to be 3.5%, 3.5%. As you can see, that's how it is on all of these. It's a very balanced monster. It's going to balance how much HP your team has to how much attack your has, which I would say is probably one of the better starting monsters, a good progression monster. So it's going to help you do that extra damage to your early guild bosses. You get that extra bleeding damage, you're going to have some nice armor break, and it's going to balance your stats between health and attack very evenly, which means your tankiness and damage will be kind of relatively the same, which is nice. So I would say for your early Marauders, stuff like that, early guild bosses, even, like I said, late game Marauders, as long as they're not killing your team, he will boost your damage to those by quite a bit because of that extra bleeding damage, but he's not the only monster. There's many more. So we'll look over here at Wee Griffin. Griffin got quite a bit of changes. First up, I think the damage dropped a little bit. Not that it really matters that much. But the big thing is, it now decreases enemy damage reduction by 30% for 2 rounds, and their speed for 2 rounds. I believe it reduced speed before, but the damage reduction's fantastic. When you reduce damage reduction by 30%, that's going to help you fight things like broken spaces much more effectively, because that's one of the reasons you deal less damage in broken spaces, is that they all have a natural reduced damage. So if you can cut through that with this monster, it's going to boost your broken spaces damage by quite a bit. But really, any unit that has damage reduction, this will help against a little bit, but it's also going to boost your attack and your holy damage for your allies. So not only is it going to be giving a little bit of a debuff to the enemy, it also buffs your allies for a little extra attack, a little extra holy damage, and the passives here are going to add holy damage and armor break. So this isn't necessarily a terrible monster for boss fighting. I would say more specialized in broken spaces because the damage reduction, which would be nice to remove off the enemies. I don't know for PvP, I don't feel like maybe with the speed decreasing, but most people won't be using this for PvP. I would say mainly for broken spaces, this boss seems like this monster seems built for. You have your, before we leave that one, the stat perks, as you can see, very low into health and very high into attack. This is going to make your team a little squishier with your health being lower, but dealing more damage. So for me, that really shows intent to fight bosses, especially weaker bosses like your Marauders, but even broken spaces. If you have a decent healing team, you can make it through broken spaces pretty decently without needing to pump your health like crazy. So I would say for broken spaces or Marauders, not a bad monster at all there, but mainly scales with attack, not with HP. It's going to push a lot of attack on your units and not so much health. The Deer here is going to be the mirror opposite of the Griffin in terms of stat allocation. Instead of giving yourself a lot of attack and little HP, it's going to give you a ton of HP and not as much attack. This is useful mainly in boss fights that are very, very difficult, or if you're trying to troll people in PvP with things like E3 Grues, E3 Valkyries, things that have a lot of natural health anyway, because you're going to boost your health by a ton. But on top of that, you're also going to take healing based on your total health, which means it makes you much harder to kill. When it drops, it's going to boost your armor by 30% and also your damage reduction by 15%. So it's going to make your team way tankier. So if you're fighting Marauders, mainly I would say guild bosses that are really kind of sticking it to you in not a good way and you're dying really quick, a leveled up Deer monster is going to really boost your tankiness, and you'd be surprised how much that extra health transfers into more damage versus the boss. Because if you're getting killed at round 3, you're not dealing a lot of damage. If you have the Deer monster, you lose a bunch of attack, but you're lasting now till round 7 or 8, you're going to deal exponentially more damage than you did at round 3. So for really hard bosses, things that really give you trouble, This is not a bad monster to have at all. It also comes in useful in things like the Brave Trial and stuff like that, because extra healing in between waves does help. It's not bad. That's the first three. Let's move over and look at the, boop. The next ones, we've got the Fox Kitten looking dealio jig. This is going to do kind of what it did before. It seems like it hasn't been changed a whole bunch. I think the damage drop got a little heavier. 50% chance to silence 4 random enemies. That's not bad for crowd control. 4 random allies are going to boost their energy by 50 and increase speed by 30 for 1 round. It seems to me like a mainly PvP type monster, because it's going to give a 50% chance to silence. Obviously, you have no need for silence against bosses. You're not going to be crowd controlling bosses. Doesn't happen. But the extra energy could be nice there. One of those things. I would say mainly a PvP-based monster, but is it the best? I would still probably lean no for PvP, but like I said, I haven't had time to test it. I've actually never even built the Fox to max that I can think of, so if you guys really like the Fox, let me know why, and tell me your experiences with it, because I'm always open to information. But I would say, in my opinion, mainly PvP-based because of the silence chance. The boosted energy means more skill drops, which is great pretty much anywhere, but it will definitely be nice in PvP where you're getting those extra crowd controls out, and boosting the speed by 30 is definitely nice as well. It's going to make your team faster, helps you get your crowd control out quicker, which in my opinion is why I really think this is built for PvP and not so much in PvE. The stat allocation is a little bit more even than the other ones, kind of balancing more towards attack than health, but kind of hanging pretty even. It's not like one or the other really heavy like the deer and the griffin were. It's kind of more of a happy medium, but leaning towards attack. Your passives, precision kind of sucks, but skill damage is definitely not a bad deal, especially when you pair that with the fact that you're getting energy from your monster drop. It will boost your skill damage anyways, so that's not bad. I would say PvP unit, but up to you guys. The next one over here, the dragon. Minor changes to the dragon, not a bunch. The big thing was the damage got knocked down a little bit. The stun chance, I believe, was removed down a little bit. I think it was 36 chance before. Now it's 28. But this used to be 4 random allies get 60% holy damage for 3 rounds. That was changed to critical damage, and I think it actually pairs very well with the dragon. It makes more sense in my opinion, mainly because of these 2 passives. These passives boost crit chance and crit damage. It's a very crit-heavy monster, so it was kind of weird that it didn't get the crit damage bonus on its skill drop. Now it has that, which means it will definitely scale better with crit-based units. If you're building things like crit Vesas or, whatever you're building, if it's focused heavily in crit, this monster is going to help that damage. Whether it be PvP or PvE, it will up your crit damage by a decent amount. And as you can see with the stat allocation here, it's mainly focused in attack and not so much in health. Not quite as extreme as the Griffin, but pretty extreme. Obviously leading toward an attack-based build. Then you've got your Snake. Snake was changed quite a bit. Mainly, your active skill drop is now massive. 708,000 damage is a lot of damage, and the poison dot lasts for 15 rounds. However, the big selling point for the Snake before was the fact that you gained extra damage to poisoned enemies. It made it kind of like a stronger version of the Wolf, depending on the team you ran. Now that's been changed and removed, and instead you get a decreased attack by 25% for 3 rounds, and decreased critical chance for 20% for 3 rounds. That's not bad, and it can be used in a lot of situations, making the Snake still a very diverse monster that's actually pretty solid all around. I like the decreased attack and crit chance for harder bosses because it makes them hit you less hard. However, if they're too hard, you might not make it to your skill drop or your monster drop before your team's already dying out, in which case you're probably better off with something like the deer for a little bit more survivability maybe. But still an all-around pretty solid unit. The attack debuff and crit debuff is definitely going to help your team survive in harder situations. Plus, it drops a very heavy damage. 708,000 is a lot of damage at one time. So that's not bad. I mean, it's not amazing like your units are going to drop, but for just extra damage, not a bad deal. The stat allocation, very similar to the, the Fox. Very even, leaning towards attack, which means it's obviously more of an attack-based monster anyway. I would say this is a decent all-around monster. I would say you used to be able to compare him very easily to the Wolf, but with the Wolf being changed to be kind of what it is now, I think you're going to get less damage, team damage at least, out of the Snake. You do get armor break and skill damage, but I believe you'll get less outright team damage from using the Snake than you will with the wolf, but you'll get more team survivability with the snake than you will with the wolf due to the fact that now you're decreasing attack and crit chance of your enemies when your monster drops. So the snake and wolf are still similar units, but your wolf is going to be more for extra damage, where your snake is going to be more survivability based, decreasing attack and crit chance. Now, the golem's been changed a little bit, and he'll probably, in my opinion, be the least used monster of all of them, because he doesn't really have a great shining point. He does a little bit of damage with his drop, chance to petrify for 2 rounds, and 4 random allies are going to increase their holy damage by 60% for 3 rounds. Holy damage is not bad. It's like an improved version of armor break. It goes directly through armor, but it does not go through reduced damage. It's, there's a whole lot of formulas for it. It is a damage boost for your team, but the fact that this guy's main job is petrification, and he only has block and armor as his passives, and the passives obviously scale towards health very heavily, a high tanky unit, you would say, unless you're utilizing a team that really focuses around petrifying enemies like Kamath for the extra petrify damage, Jara even, Dark Arthidal. This monster's not going to do a terrible lot for you that I can see. I think you'd be better off picking a different monster for just about any portion of the game. For PvP, there's better monsters. For PvE, obviously much better monsters. This is probably the one I would say gets used the least now, because holy damage, while it is nice, isn't really that great when you pair it with the weaker passives this one has. I don't know, it seems more tanky built, but trying to give damage at the same time. I don't know, maybe like a midway monster. I'm not big on it, but like I said, that's up to you guys. You want to build it, test it out, tell me what you think about it. I'm all in for that. All up for that. The last monster here is the Ice Monster, who I would say was the crappiest monster official ever launched. It was completely useless. There's no reason to ever build it. And private server, points to the private server, actually made this thing usable. What they've done is it's been changed, obviously. It still has a chance to freeze enemies, the higher chance, obviously, over the Petrify and the Stun from the Dragon and the Golem. It's got a 36% chance to freeze, but it's also going to boost your team's holy damage for 3 rounds and their control immunity by 25%. When you see control immune by 25%, that's almost a guarantee. This is a PvP monster, and it seems like it'll be really solid for it. That extra control immune is a huge deal, at least for 4 of your allies. That makes them harder to stun, freeze, petrify, etc., which in PvP is a huge, huge, huge thing. You'll probably see a lot of this frozen monster show up in the top tier PvP teams, I would think. Of course, I'm not top tier PvP, so I don't know for sure. However, it also may come in certain uses during PvE fights. When you fight guild bosses with, say, ice blinks, things like that, anything that can crowd control you in a boss fight, like the Kamath Marauder, this monster may actually even help you there due to the fact that it's going to give you control immunity and holy damage, which will give you a little extra damage anyway. While it's not the most amazing PvE monster, I would say that control immunity definitely will have times it pops up and saves your butt, so might not be worth overlooking the Ice Monster now on private. But also, as you can see with the stat allocation, it's going to go more for health than attack, but still a pretty balanced medium. But a big thing that got changed is this passive here is now going to give you control immune by 15%. That's not bad for a passive. That's actually really solid. The armor break's not so huge for PvP, but that extra control immunity is going to be a big, big deal, especially when you're getting 25% when your monster drops. You're looking at a free 40% control immunity on a monster, or on one of your units, or up to 4 of your units, actually, as soon as your monster drops. So that's a really big deal for PvP. I would say, hands down, this is going to be the new PvP meta monster. That's just my words to you guys. I don't know. I would say that's going to be the way it is. It looks to be leaning that way. But that's pretty much your monster guide. Not a super in-depth one, but kind of a brief overview looking at what they're going to do and where I think they'll work best. So you can make your decision on which monster you want to re-put your monster blood and gold back into. I decided to go with the wolf here for easier boss fights to put out more damage, because I like that extra damage for bleeding targets, and I chose the deer for those harder boss fights to boost my survivability a little bit, just in case I'm getting kind of hammered on. And I think those are 2 that's going to work well for me, because like I said, I'm a PvE kind of guy. I don't play a lot of high-end PvP. I did definitely debate putting some points into my Griffin for that reduced damage reduction for broken space bosses, but with broken spaces being what it is on private server, I'm not super worried about investing in that yet, so it can be a a down the road kind of thing. I also debated pretty highly between upping my dragon and my snake. I decided to go snake because it's kind of a midway between my wolf and my deer, where my wolf gives me extra damage, my deer gives me extra tankiness. The snake's going to give me some damage, but also some extra survivability. So I kind of like it, and we'll see how it plays out down the road. I might end up swapping it out. But yeah, if I would say if you're a really PvP-minded person, the ice monster is going to be a very big deal for you. If you're very petrify-minded, you might use the rock golem. But for PvP, I would say you're probably best using something like the fox, the ice golem, maybe even the dragon for crit-based builds that are going to nuke down enemies. It's not a bad idea. And some people still use the deer for the extra HP on units like Valkyrie. Really, it depends on your team, I guess. But I would still say if you're going PvP, this will probably be one of the better monsters for you. If you're going PvE, you're probably going to want, I would say, the wolf, especially for early game, would be great. But if you're having trouble, the deer is going to help boost your survivability and also boost your damage because you're not dying so quickly. Really, there's a lot of monsters you can pick for each thing. But that's what I'd say to specialize in. Hope you guys learned a little bit of the monsters. Hopefully I didn't lead you guys astray, because that always feels bad. Especially if they change it again like tomorrow. It's like, oh, look, all the monsters are different. Yay! We'll see. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Talked about the new events. They're nothing super special. Pretty easy to go over. But I wanted to touch on the monsters a little bit because people keep asking me about it. So that is going to be it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please make sure, smash that thumbs up button and show your support. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. And tell your friends about it because that definitely helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys in the next one.